Dr. Zeelk had cataloged over 287 intelligent species in the last 7 galactic cycles. He had dissected the sleep patterns of silicon-bodied dreamers from Mesquite 5, argued with the gas-based thinkers of Uran about the neurological implications of unconsciousness, and even spent a week in a suspended dream state with the hive singers of Doral Prime. But nothing, not a single data point, not an ancient scroll, not even the chaotic sleep chant rituals of the Lermatians had prepared him for humans. More specifically, the way they barely slept. Zeelk stood at the edge of Observation Bay 6 aboard the diplomatic research vessel Vuratrin's gaze, his upper limbs folded behind his thorax, his lower ones tapping notes into a portable console. The human subject was pacing again. Subject age 12, Harrison Dole, male, 32 Earth years old, native to North America, and currently operating on what Zeelk had determined to be 4 hours of accumulated sleep over the past 48 Earth hours. Zeelk twitched. Unacceptable, he muttered. Physiological collapse probability, high. Motivation for self-harm, low. Cultural pressure? Unknown. The human finally sat down on the couch, rubbing his temples. Zeelk's translator unit chirped. You gonna keep hovering back there like that, or you want something, Doc? I am not hovering, Zeelk said, stepping forward. I am studying. You are exhibiting signs of sleep deprivation, irritability, ocular fatigue, and minor tremors in your extremities. Yet you persist in remaining awake. Explain. Harrison leaned back and blinked slowly. Coffee wore off. I got 2 cans of Red Surge in my bag. I'll be fine. Zeelk tilted his head. Red Surge. Harrison reached into the duffel bag beside him and pulled out a dented silver and orange can. Energy drink. Caffeine, taurine, guarana. Stuff like that. Helps you stay awake. Zeelk reached forward with a percussive limb and gently took the can. He turned it in his digits, scanning the label. This is a chemical compound designed to prevent your species from sleeping? Harrison chuckled and pulled out the second can. It's more like tricking your body into thinking it's not tired. Works in a pinch. Zeelk's pupils dilated. You voluntarily consume biochemicals to suppress your natural need for rest, which is critical to your recovery, memory consolidation, and cellular repair. Yeah, Harrison said, popping the tab and taking a sip. Welcome to Earth. Zeelk had to sit. 2 days later, Zeelk convened an emergency subcommittee of biological curiosities. I submit to you, he said to the gathered panel of interspecies doctors, that humans may be engaging in chronic artificial sleep suppression on a societal scale. Dr. Fellner, a feathered physician from the Talic Accord, blinked all 4 eyes. For what purpose? Zeelk gestured to a hollow projection of Harrison jogging in place while drinking another can of Red Surge. They claim it is to increase productivity. The human subject is part of a diplomatic exchange team. He has not taken a full sleep cycle in over 3 days. Dr. Ken of the Gluvian Neurological Institute recoiled. Violation of biological limits is a Class 3 cognitive hazard. I know, Zeelk snapped. Which is why I propose an extended field study. The council buzzed with murmurs. Finally, Fellner nodded. Approved. But you must remain strictly observant. No interference. Zeelk nodded. He had no intention of interfering. He just wanted to understand how a species could run itself into the ground and still function. 2 weeks into the study, Zeelk found himself trailing Harrison through a narrow corridor on level 5, where the human was helping install heat regulators near the ship's hydroponic systems. Harrison moved with the sluggishness of someone who hadn't slept more than a few hours in days. You do realize, Zeelk said, that your coordination has decreased by 23% since your last rest period? Probably, Harrison muttered, tightening a bolt. But the shipment's arriving tomorrow. If the regulators aren't stabilized, the whole lower deck will freeze. Zeelk hesitated. There are other humans aboard. Why must it be you? They're resting, Harrison said. I volunteered. Besides, I've got my backup drink. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small blue bottle labeled Zap. Energy shot, quantum berry flavor. Zeelk sighed. That night, Zeelk broke protocol and scanned the drink's contents. Caffeine, L-carnitine, B vitamins, glucose compounds, none of which should be consumed in such concentrations without rest. He submitted a preliminary report to the Vuratrin Central Archive and received a blinking warning. Observation only. Do not interfere. But the next morning, Harrison collapsed. Zeelk found him near the airlock, slumped against a bulkhead, his face pale and damp with sweat. The energy shot was still clutched in his hand, unopened. Zeelk tapped his comm medical emergency. Human subject H12 is unconscious. Initiate immediate retrieval. The medics arrived within minutes. Zeelk followed them to the ship's infirmary, where Harrison was placed on a diagnostic table. The readings were erratic, heart rate elevated, blood pressure unstable, and cortical activity fluctuating rapidly. He's in metabolic shock, the lead medic said. Extreme fatigue combined with chemical overexertion. Zeelk stood beside the bed, eyes fixed on the human's shallow breathing. How long will he take to recover? If there's no organ damage, maybe a few days, the medic said. But that depends on whether he rests. Harrison regained consciousness 8 hours later. He groaned and tried to sit. Zeelk gently pressed him back. You must not move. Harrison blinked. What happened? You pushed your body beyond its threshold, Zeelk said. Your artificial stimulation methods failed. Did we get the regulators fixed? Yes, Zeelk said. But not by you. Harrison sighed. Damn. I do not understand, Zeelk said. Why risk yourself? Why not sleep? Harrison looked at him, exhausted. Because if something needs to get done, and no one else will do it, you push through. That's how I was raised. You make it work. Sleep later. Zeelk stared at him for a long time. It was not logical. It was not healthy. And yet, it was. Consistent. In the following days, Harrison remained under observation. He was forced to rest, though not without protest. Zeelk watched him grow irritable, then calm, then finally cooperative. On the third day, Harrison sat up slowly. Feeling better. Zeelk was silent for a moment. Do you require another energy drink? Harrison chuckled weakly. No. I think I've had enough for a while. Zeelk tapped his console. Noted. Subject appears to be recovering. Refraining from artificial stimulants. Don't get used to it, Harrison said. I'll probably be back on coffee next week. I suspected as much. Later that cycle, Zeelk requested an interview with the other humans aboard. Most had similar stories. Long nights, short sleep, deadlines, responsibilities. Energy drinks were a common tool not because they wanted to avoid sleep, but because they felt they couldn't afford it. Zeelk sat in his quarters that evening, reviewing hours of footage. Humans staggering into meetings with cups of steaming black liquid. Others sipping brightly colored cans while typing. One had even installed a dispenser in his quarters. He recorded a final note. Humans do not avoid sleep because they lack need. They avoid it because they are driven by obligation, ambition, or necessity. The use of chemical stimulants is not a replacement but a crutch. A flawed, desperate crutch. He paused. But perhaps an understandable one. Zeelk closed the file and dimmed the lights. He needed to rest. His next report was due in the morning. And for the first time in weeks, he found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, a cup of that bitter black drink wouldn't be such a terrible thing. Zeelk had never been summoned by a human before. Certainly not by one still recovering from a self-induced metabolic incident that could have ended with organ shutdown. Yet here he was, following a text-only note slid under his office hatch at rest cycle 14. The handwriting was uneven, the grammar odd, and the ink faintly smelled of sour berries. But it was unmistakably human. Meet me in the arboretum. Bring coffee. Zeelk would have ignored it if not for the postscript. No energy drinks. Promise. So he went. The arboretum aboard the Vuratrin's gaze was a wide, dome-shaped compartment lined with artificial soil and photonic trees genetically engineered to simulate Earth foliage. The humans had requested it early in the mission, claiming it made their brains feel less boxed in. Zeelk had initially dismissed the space as an indulgence. Now he found it oddly pleasant to walk through. Harrison was waiting near a cluster of synthetic birches, seated on a bench with a wool blanket over his shoulders and a small solar lamp at his feet. He looked like someone trying to recreate a camping trip from memory, poorly. You brought the stuff? Harrison asked, nodding at the thermal container in Zeelk's upper arm. This is a stimulant with moderate bitterness and low nutritional value. You humans insist it's comforting. To the soul? Yeah, Harrison said, accepting the mug. Thanks. Zeelk sat on the bench's edge, careful not to crush the laminated root mesh beneath. You requested this meeting. What? Harrison blew on the mug. I figured if I was going to start being honest about our weird habits, I might as well show you the rest. Zeelk blinked. There is more. Oh, Doc, Harrison said, sipping. We've barely scratched the surface. Zeelk prepared his recorder. There's this thing we do, Harrison continued, when we want to stay awake, but the drinks stop working. We call it power napping. Nap implies rest. But you indicated you stopped talking. Let me explain, Harrison interrupted. It's not full sleep. It's like tricking your body into thinking it had a full sleep cycle when it only got, say, 20 minutes. But it has to be the right 20 minutes. Too long, and you wake up worse. Too short, and it's pointless. Zeelk tilted his head. You manipulate sleep states? We try. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you wake up feeling like your bones are full of gravel. Zeelk made a note. This is not adaptation. This is improvisation under duress. Exactly. It's what we're good at. Several minutes passed with only the sound of the artificial breeze rustling through engineered leaves. Do you remember when I collapsed? Harrison asked suddenly. I do. I thought my chest was going to split open. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. It was like my body just hit a wall I didn't know existed. Zeelk didn't respond. I've hit that wall before, Harrison went on. Back when I worked construction, I fell asleep standing up once. Woke up next to a pile of rebar with a crowbar in my hand. No idea how I got there. Why didn't you stop? Because I had rent. Because there were deadlines. Because people expected me to just keep going. Zeelk finally spoke. That is not sustainable. Nope, Harrison said. But it's normal. A low chime sounded from Zeelk's comm band. He ignored it. Harrison stood and stretched. Want to see something fun? Zeelk followed him deeper into the arboretum. They reached a small clearing where a padded mat was laid out. At its center was a device made of elastic cords and a curved carbon frame. It's called a resistance hammock, Harrison said. We use it to simulate micro-rest. You crawl in, suspend yourself, and the tension triggers a neurological reset. Supposedly. Zeelk stared. You sleep while suspended? Not exactly. It's more like a reboot. You ever seen an old Earth laptop crash and then start working again after someone slams the lid and reboots it? I have not. Well, this is that. For your brain. Zeelk watched as Harrison climbed into the device, adjusted the straps, closed his eyes, and went limp. 5 minutes passed. 6. At minute 7, Harrison twitched, opened his eyes, and unhooked himself. Feel like a new man, he said, rolling his shoulders. You were unconscious for approximately 400 seconds. Yeah. Perfect reset. Zeelk was silent for a full cycle of arboretum lighting. This is not science. This is ritualized desperation. Call it what you want, Harrison said cheerfully, but it works. Sometimes. That evening, Zeelk submitted a new report. Human species demonstrates layered strategies for resisting sleep beyond chemical stimulation. These include micro-rest rituals, mechanical suspension methods, and absurdly specific timing. Underlying all methods is a cultural resistance to inactivity, coupled with a deep-seated belief in personal overexertion as virtue. He hesitated before adding, it is unclear whether these behaviors are adaptive or pathological, possibly both. 3 days later, Zeelk attended a cross-species health seminar aboard the Gaze. Representatives from 12 species presented wellness protocols. The Talic demonstrated their limb cooling meditation. The Gluvians offered a sonic resonance chamber for brainwave harmonization. The humans, invited last minute, sent Harrison. He walked onto the stage with a cup of black coffee and a folded camping chair. He unfolded the chair, sat, and lifted the cup. This is it, he said. This is our method. The crowd rustled uncomfortably. We don't have fancy resonance chambers or built-in sleep cycles that sync with planetary tides. We have chairs and coffee, and if things get bad, we have closets where we hide for 5 minutes and pretend the world doesn't exist. A Lermatian scholar raised a question. You simulate isolation rather than pursue regenerative states. Sometimes, Harrison replied. Other times, we just cry in the washroom and go back to work. The room fell into stunned silence. Zeelk watched the faces of the other delegates. No one laughed. No one scoffed. They were too busy trying to understand. Later, back in the medical wing, Zeelk found Harrison folding towels into a supply bin. You surprised them, Zeelk said. I know. They expected a technique. A method. I gave them the truth, Harrison said, tucking a towel. Zeelk hesitated. Your species survives not because it avoids limits, but because it refuses to acknowledge them. Same thing sometimes. Zeelk looked at the human's hands, still trembling faintly from latent fatigue. "Harrison," he said slowly, "you are not well. Better than I was. That is not the same." "I know." Zeelk reached into his satchel and retrieved a small data card. "I've compiled everything you and your team have shared. I'm submitting it to the Galactic Health Council." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "To request a formal classification for human sleep strategy, adaptive dysfunction." Harrison chuckled. "Catchy. You may be eligible for interspecies aid. Resources. Sleep tech. I'll believe it when I see it." Zeelk leaned in slightly. "You should rest." "I will," Harrison said. "Right after I fix the oxygen scrubbers on Deck 7. Zeelk didn't argue. He simply turned and left, making a final note as he walked. Humans do not sleep when they are tired. They sleep when they are allowed. And often, no one gives them permission, not even themselves. The ship's artificial dawn began with a gentle hum through the walls and a gradual brightening of the corridor panels. Zeelk was already awake, hunched over his display in the medical suite, watching the footage from the previous day's motion logs. Harrison had returned to duty with medical clearance, but Zeelk had insisted on tracking his movement patterns for 48 hours. Not for suspicion, though. Truthfully, that lingered, but because the patterns didn't make sense. The human had been spending long stretches in storage compartment 12B, a rarely accessed chamber originally constructed as overflow for botanical equipment. There was no reason for a diplomat or technician to be there, let alone for over an hour, twice in one cycle. Zeelk closed the file and adjusted his outer robe. Curiosity strained against protocol. He paused exactly 6 seconds before leaving the suite. The corridor to compartment 12B was dimmer than the others. The ship's self-adjusting lighting didn't prioritize areas with low traffic, and the walls bore signs of mild oxidation. Zeelk tapped the panel beside the door. It slid open with a reluctant hiss. "You're not supposed to be here unless you're checking moss cultures," Harrison said without looking up. He was seated cross-legged on the deck, surrounded by what appeared to be a nest of thermal blankets, 2 insulated flasks, a portable heater, and most troubling, a small bottle of dried capsules bearing no label. Zeelk stepped inside and let the door seal behind him. "You were self-medicating. They're melatonin supplements. Legal. Even on your ship. You were still self-medicating." Harrison set the bottle down and leaned back against a crate. "I sleep better in here. It's quiet. No humming, no announcements, no one knocking to ask if I've defragged my circadian protocol." Zeelk crouched beside him, folding his limbs neatly. "This is not a sanctioned rest chamber." "Exactly. That's why it works." Zeelk scanned the nest. The blankets had been layered for insulation. The heater was angled to circulate warmth, but not overheat. A bottle of water was tucked beside the pillow. "You built a recovery zone. I built a place where I won't get poked by a monitor every 30 minutes. You removed the biometric patch. Didn't want to be tracked." Zeelk studied him. "You are aware that hiding from medical surveillance aboard a diplomatic vessel is grounds for disciplinary review. Then review me." Harrison rubbed his face. "But if you do, I want it on record that I haven't had a stimulant in 5 days. Not even tea. I've been sleeping here. Real sleep. Not an app. Not a reboot. Full cycle." Zeelk stared. "You willingly entered full rest?" "I had to. I was forgetting things. Names, codes, basic protocols. I called the Glivian delegate Captain Flapface." Out loud. Zeelk twitched involuntarily. "He is not a captain." "I know that now." Zeelk let the silence settle before speaking. "Why here?" Harrison shrugged. "Because it doesn't feel like I'm supposed to be doing anything in here. There's nothing urgent. No beeping panels, no screens. Just quiet. And blankets. You created the conditions of dormancy by removing all indicators of obligation. More or less." Zeelk folded his upper limbs. "This is not sustainable." "I'm not making a blueprint," Harrison said. "I'm just trying to not fall apart." Zeelk tapped his calm. "I am authorizing this compartment as a temporary human rest chamber. You will report usage time. You will not exceed 10 hours without check-in." "You're serious?" "You have demonstrated initiative. I am reciprocating with structured oversight." Harrison blinked at him. "You're really bad at saying thank you." "I said you demonstrated initiative. That's not a thank you." Zeelk stood. "I am a xenoneurologist, not a poet." Later that cycle, Zeelk submitted a final report to the Galactic Health Council. Subject H12 displayed an unexpected capacity for self-regulation after experiencing acute stimulant fatigue. By voluntarily establishing an off-grid, low-stimulus environment, he initiated a full neurochemical reset through uninterrupted rest. The chamber setup, though primitive, mirrors established therapeutic isolation modules used in other species for sleep recovery. This suggests that humans, though often reckless in their sleep behavior, retain an instinctual understanding of what they require when external pressures are removed. He paused, then added, while human sleep dysfunction is partially cultural, it is also rooted in environmental design. When stripped of obligation cues and given autonomy, the subject achieved equilibrium. 3 days later, Zeelk received a formal reply. The council had reviewed his proposal. They were authorizing a pilot program, Human Autonomy-Based Rest Environments, HABRA. The gaze would retrofit one compartment for human use, with environmental controls dictated by the human crew. Sleep would be monitored indirectly through passive sensors and daily self-reports. No stimulants permitted. No mandatory schedules. Zeelk found Harrison near the hydroponics level, adjusting the nutrient ratios for the earth plants. The council reviewed your sleeping box, Zeelk said. Oh. Harrison didn't look up. They are funding more. Harrison straightened. You're serious. You invented an effective sleep chamber. They want more like it. I just wanted a place to nap. You build a protocol. Harrison laughed softly. I'm going to put that on a mug. That would be culturally appropriate. The following week, the new chamber compartment 8D was completed. It featured adjustable lighting, temperature controls, noise dampening panels, and a single reclining chair enclosed by a soft privacy barrier. Harrison stood in the doorway during the inaugural inspection. This looks like a therapist's office on a moon colony. It is optimized for neurological decompression. Harrison stepped inside, turned a few knobs, and lay back. It's missing one thing. Zeelk waited. Harrison pulled a folded blanket from his bag and draped it over himself. Now it's perfect. Zeelk remained at the threshold, observing. I'm going to sleep now. Real sleep. Noted. As the door slid shut, Zeelk tapped a note into his console. Humans do not always require external correction. Sometimes, they simply require permission. There were no alarms that night. No late reports. No error pings from the human quarters. For the first time in several cycles, the ship was quiet. And Zeelk, for the first time since the diplomatic exchange began, slept without reviewing his notes first.